to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers. You are in Season 6 of Wrestling at Random, where the theme, if you've been listening, is more wrestling than ever, more even than Season 5, where that was the same theme. We've roughly doubled the amount of wrestling that was dumped into the randomizer, which then, as the name implies, randomly picks a show for us to watch. And this week's show, on the surface, you would think, well, it's WWF Superstars. That's not all that deep of a cut. This is an episode of WWF Superstars that is not available on Peacock /WWE Network /Netflix /wherever you get the WWE archives. It's not even available anywhere on YouTube. This is from a private collection, the dark web. This is a Boston TV syndicated version of WWF Superstars from April 2nd, 1988, hot on the heels of Wrestlemania 4.
This is our first time dipping into the 80s production of WWF Superstars of Wrestling. Here on the free feed, we've done WWF Superstars, but those were all shows from the 90s. Back in Season 2, Episode 17 of this podcast, we reviewed a Superstars from 1991. We were in Season 3, we got Season 3, Episode 23. We reviewed a Superstars from 95. And then in Season 5, we got a Superstars, Season 5, Episode 22. It was from 1994. So this is the earliest Superstars of Wrestling we've had here. On some of those previous broadcasts, we've talked about how this was the A show for syndication for the WWF at the time. And you would get a lot of squash matches, and they would sometimes do an angle. And if they did the angle, you would then see it on all of the syndicated shows and especially Primetime Wrestling at this time.
Yeah, Primetime would sort of collect stuff from Superstars, from Challenge, a few other things. But yeah, here's Superstars of Wrestling. This air date was April 2nd, 1988. The show itself took place March 9th, 1988 from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So Jim Crockett Promotions, rest in peace by this point, just barely, or maybe about to rest in peace. The Winston-Salem Coliseum, not what you would think exactly as a WWF stronghold. As you mentioned, a Superstars taping means lots and lots and lots of short matches taped for many weeks of television. So we'll get into the actual show that we're reviewing itself, but here are all the other matches that took place outside of the matches that are on the show we're about to review.
So they recorded 3 episodes worth of Superstars at this tape.
3 episodes worth of Superstars and a bunch of other things that are listed as dark matches, some of which seem like maybe they had been taped for maybe like a challenge or something as well. But here we go. This is everything else that was taped in Winston-Salem, North Carolina on March 9th, 1988, before we get to the actual stuff we're going to review from that TV. Future WCW Special Forces member, future one half of the United States Tag Team Champions, Todd Champion, defeats Barry Horowitz in the WWF in 1988. The Killer Bees defeat the Conquistadors. Greg Valentine defeats Lanny Poffo. 3 minutes and 52 seconds of hot action, I'm sure. Ken Patera defeats Tom Stone. Outlaw Ron Bass defeats Smoky Mountain Wrestling superstar Reno Riggins. If you listen to the bonus feed over at patreon.com/wrestling@random, you'll understand that reference. Brutus Beefcake and Randy Savage defeat Greg Valentine and Honky Tonk Man via disqualification.
So the dream team of Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine were exploding on this episode?
Apparently, maybe this was a test run for Mega Powers exploding 1 year later at WrestleMania. The one-man gang defeated Jake the Snake Roberts by count out. It always throws me off, as we'll see later on in this show as well. One-man gang being in WWF as one-man gang and not Akeem, it always just seems weird to me. A miscarriage of justice, if there ever was one. Hercules defeats a young Owen Hart in
Wow.
1988. So pre-Blue Blazer run in the WWF, Owen Hart. The Honky Tonk Man defeats Jim Evans. Strikeforce defeats Iron Mike Sharp and John Ziegler, who, if I'm not mistaken, was the former commissioner of the NHL.
Maybe it might be.
Yeah, I don't think so, but might as well have been. Coco Beware, with Davey Boy Smith and the Dynamite Kid for some reason in his corner, defeated Pete Sanchez. Ricky Steamboat defeated Dave Wagner.
Oh, the Coco and the Bulldogs, that must have been taped for one that aired before WrestleMania 4 because
the first two episodes are pre-Mania 4. So yeah.
So in Mania 4 the you had the Bulldogs and Coco against the Islanders and Bobby Heenan. That was
I see. I was wondering if maybe there was some sort of like zoo themed deal, and we had Frankie and Matilda had become friends. Maybe there was going to be a cartoon produced by the WWF. Ricky Steamboat defeats Dave Wagner. The One Man Gang returns later on in this show, same show, to defeat Rick Hunter. Ted DiBiase defeats Scott Casey. Okay, moving on. A bunch of dark matches leading into the second Superstars taping on the same show. The British Bulldogs with Coco Beware defeat Bill Newkirk and Iron Mike Sharp. Hercules defeats Dave Stoudemire. So if you were there, you are now seeing the second Hercules match of the evening live.
After you've already seen the One Man Gang work a couple times.
Yes. Jake Roberts defeats Pete Sanchez. Demolition defeats Mark Young and Mike Richards, a former Philadelphia Flyers great. Jim Duggan defeats Tom Stone. Randy Savage defeats Terry Gibbs. These matches, the longest of those matches, which those all aired on Superstars on the 26th, March 26th, 1988. The longest match was 3 minutes and 14 seconds.
Wow. You just had to sit through a marathon of squash matches.
The only thing I can equate it to in modern times was the CM Punk returns at AEW Rampage at the United Center when we had like a 2-hour dark elevation taping and then a bunch of borderline dark matches and then Punk's promo. That's the closest modern comp I have to that. And then we'll talk about the actual matches that aired on the April 2nd, 1988 Superstars taping. The final match of that entire marathon night was a dark tag team match with the team of Hulk Hogan and Bam Bam Bigelow defeating Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase in 11 minutes flat.
Yeah, so they at least made it worth your while. You got to see a Hogan appearance.
Which is honestly kind of surprising.
So we mentioned that a couple of these Superstars that were taped aired before WrestleMania 4. This one that we're going to review from April 2nd, 1988, aired the week after WrestleMania 4 had just taken place. So WrestleMania 4 took place March 27th, 1988. I saw WrestleMania 4 at the Rialto Theater in Joliet, Illinois on closed circuit TV. This was pre-pay-per-view.
Which is still going today. The Rialto Square Theater was recently shut down for a period of time due to asbestos, but I think they're back up and running.
They are back.
I know you've seen in like last year or two a stand-up comedy show. I've seen in the last year or two a concert there, so that place is still going strong. I don't know if the closed circuit connection is still all wired in there.
Yeah, I doubt closed circuits, but no, they do other events too. I performed as a wedding officiant. I also did a wedding at the Rialto.
I hear that you do that.
I watched WrestleMania 4 there, and WrestleMania 4 not regarded as one of the best manias. That was the one-night tournament to crown a new champion after the Hogan-Andre main event with the multiple Hebners and DiBiase buying the title. And Jack Tunney held up the belt. They had a one-night tournament to crown a new champion. That, of course, was won by the Macho Man, Randy Savage. We'll get to that here in a minute. We start with the open to this show. We're told we're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
The first of several opens. So we get the classic lightning bolt graphic with what the world is watching.
And a Mean Gene voiceover for that.
Yes, a Mean Gene voiceover, which is a bit surprising because I feel like they use Howard Finkel for a lot of that stuff. More on that later. Then Vince McMahon tells us we're in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I almost wonder if this was like a required thing to do a TV taping in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Like somehow that's like a state law or something. Because then they have all these like B-roll montage of like the Winston-Salem School of the Arts, Wake Forest, all these different things. It felt like something that was mandated. I don't recall too many times where they did something like this. And then we get Vince McMahon and Jesse Ventura. We see Jesse for the first and only time on this show on screen, wearing a pink blazer, a blue tank top, and like a feathered top hat. Somehow, this is actually one of the least ostentatious Jesse Ventura outfits we've seen here on this podcast.
Yeah, more of a casual look for Jesse, but still outrageous for Vince McMahon at the time. They welcome us to the broadcast. They run down who we're going to see today. We're going to see the Macho Man, Andre the Giant, a WrestleMania 4 report, The Rock Don Morocco, Bad News Brown, and Rick Rude. This sounds like my kind of lineup. I'm pretty pumped.
Yeah, I certainly don't. Anytime you tell me I'm going to watch a Bad News Brown match, my ears perk up.
We get a flashback to Mania 4. So we get a little graphic in the corner telling us that the Coliseum video release of WrestleMania 4 will come out in May, so a month from now. I remember walking to my local video store, walking to Action Video when it came out, and I rented it. It was a dual VHS cassette. So
the double case, the bigger case. Yeah,
it had two VHSs in it, and the box. When you go to the video store, the box was on the shelf, and you could pick up the box, and the box would open, and it had like a pop-up 3D Hulk Hogan that would pop out of the two. So it was a very elaborate packaging for the WrestleMania 4 2 VHS set. We get a little graphic for that in the corner, and then we see the finish of Butch Reed versus Randy Savage in the opening round. Savage hitting the flying elbow and winning. Then we go to the next round where he's against Greg the Hammer Valentine. We get some highlights, but not the finish of the match.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like we see he hits the top rope axe handle, gets a 2 count, and then we just move on to the next match. Just briefly want to mention, it always throws me off to see blonde-haired, the natural Butch Reed in the WWF. Again, just one of those weird, relatively short-lived runs. Not quite the Rebel Dick Slater, but still always a little weird.
We jump ahead to the next round, which was Savage against the one-man gang. Savage hits a double axe to the floor. Also not the finish. The finish of that was the gang getting caught using the cane of the Slickster, and so he got disqualified.
So I guess they probably didn't show that finish because
it was lame.
Well, it was lame and doesn't exactly make Savage look, like the whole story of this is Savage 4 wins in one night, and that just kind of doesn't play into that as well.
So we get highlights of the finals of the tournament, which is Savage versus Ted DiBiase, by far the best match in the tournament.
You're telling me Savage and Ted DiBiase was better than Savage and One Man Gang? I'm shocked.
We get extended highlights of this one. Mostly it's Hulk Hogan's arrival during this match.
Well, the whole deal with that is Liz, Andre protects Ted DiBiase from Savage hitting the top rope axe handle to the floor. Savage stays in the ring and says something to Liz. She heads back to the locker room and comes back with Hulk Hogan. We should also note Fashion Corner. I feel like for Miss Elizabeth, it's very important to say she had a different outfit for each of Randy's 4 matches on the show. I like that aesthetically, and I also like the confidence in her man that she knew. She was so convinced he was going to make to the final that she bought/brought 4 different outfits.
Love it. Yeah, Savage missed the flying elbow. DiBiase puts on the $1 Million Dream. Hogan comes into the ring when the referee is distracted with a chair, hits DiBiase in the back with it. Savage goes back up, hits the flying elbow for the pin, and wins the vacant WWF Championship. We get the entire post-match celebration, which is the birth of the Mega Powers, the tag team of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage.
Jesse is screaming that Ted DiBiase was robbed, and as we've said for now 6 seasons on this podcast, Jesse Ventura, while he is a heel commentator, is 99 times out of 100 correct when he's complaining about something that a babyface does. This just immediately took me back to how much as a child I did not understand Hulk Hogan, the character. I hated Hogan. Hogan was the most dastardly heel in professional wrestling. Always.
Every time.
Think of how often he would rake guys' eyes, rake guys' backs. Here, completely unprompted, unwarranted, as Ted DiBiase, the heel, is about to win with $1 Million Dream. He comes in and hits DiBiase with the chair. Yes, you could say whatever had happened on Saturday night's main event before, but in this match, there was no reason for the valiant babyface to do this. Like, I think of how different Hogan's character was from Dusty Rhodes' character during the same time. Yes, Dusty would get, like, obviously get down and dirty when he had to, but it was because he was provoked. Like, he wasn't out there raking eyes like as the aggressor here with this chair shot. So weird, such a odd character.
If you had the promo content of Dusty Rhodes with the in-ring character of Hulk Hogan, they'd be the most dastardly heel of all time.
Oh, one as the biggest baby face in the world. Like,
people
Hogan,
forget about those Dusty promos where he's talking about he's rich and he's a ladies' man and he's
he's wearing the fur coats and everything. Those are some, and this is face Dusty. We're not talking like early mid-70s heel Dusty. This is something else. Like, I will go to my grave saying that the Hollywood Hogan character was no more of a heel,
correct,
than Hulk Hogan, say your prayers, take your vitamins. They're the same guy, just black and a beard. As far as the gear, he wore black and he had a beard. No difference.
Yeah, and only adding like some begging off and some other stuff. That's
exactly. He would be both Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I was way more. You mentioned not being a Hogan guy. I was not a Hogan guy in the 80s either. I was a big Macho Man guy at this point. First, I was a Ricky Steamboat guy. When he got eliminated in the first round, I almost walked out of that Rialto Theater and said, I'm done with this tournament. Ricky Steamboat lost to Greg the Hammer Valentine. I was angry.
So is that the genesis of your hatred of Greg the Hammer Valentine?
It's been rooted deeply for so long.
I think we may have actually. This show is basically therapy today.
But yeah, I was a huge Macho Man guy in this time period. I was like jumping off the top of my dresser, throwing flying elbows to my brother. To tell my brother to lay there, I'm jumping off the top of the dresser, throwing flying elbows. I was a huge Macho Man fan at this point. We go to the ring for our first action. So a long, first 15 minutes of this was a recap of Mania 4?
Yeah, this show is as much a recap of Mania 4 as it is new content, which at first I was like, oh God, like, are we even going to review this? And then I realized, okay, there are a few, short as they are, actual matches.
The first of one of these actual matches in the ring is Ravishing Rick Rude with his manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, taking on jobber Eric Cooper,
who is not small. Like, that's one notable thing for the most part on these WWF tapings. There's a lot more good size, maybe not great shape or looking like stars, but good size jobbers as compared to some of the very undersized guys we would see in other territories. This seems to be relatively early on in the Rick Rude cut my music, do his shtick afterwards, Inner City Sweat Hogs, that sort of thing. Because like Vince and Jesse are like, oh, what's happening here? He does that. He has an amazing mullet, amazing mustache. This is pre-airbrush tights, but still cool stuff. And as the match starts, Rude hits a big back suplex, and we get a Bobby Heenan inset promo, which is always nice.
Yeah, before we get into the match, though, he did stop the music to say what he'd like to have right now is for all you Southern Swamp sows to keep it down while he takes his robe off. I
did like how he tailored his insults to the geographical area that he was in. It's an underrated, great thing about Rick Rude.
We get that Bobby Heenan inset promo where we're told Rick Rude will debut the Rude Awakening next week. That's where Rude will pull a woman into the ring and give her a kiss.
So again,
week.
Like the beginning stages of the real ravishing Rick Rude character that most people would associate with. And first said like debut the Rude Awakening. I'm like, oh, first time he's going to do the neck breaker, but no, it's this deal bringing the woman in.
We get a localized voiceover for the upcoming Boston House show. So sometimes you would have in the commercial break a localized set of promos. And here you would also get, they would cut in and voice over the commentary with a localized rundown of the card. This one's coming to the Boston Garden because this was airing in Boston.
This feels very much like a WWF exclusive thing in terms of like a production choice. Pretty much every other territory, like you said, that we reviewed, they've got, the localized promo, coming in or out of the commercial break where it's specifically, you got the interviewer and the wrestler and they're on camera talking about the show, promoting their match. Here, like the match is going on and then the audio for Vince and Jesse Ventura cuts out and it's Howard Finkel doing this big over-the-top overdub for the Boston Garden show, which he says will be main evented by Andre the Giant versus, quote, the wild and woolly Bam Bam Bigelow. Well, several of these throughout the show, one of which he'll actually run down the entire card.
This is a Rude squash here. Highlights are hitting a top rope fist drop and then finishing the match with a perfect Hangman's neck breaker for the casual lounging tranquilo pin attempt here for Rick Rude getting the win.
Yeah, the Rude Awakening. I love in the replay, Jesse says, watch closely. The added hip movement makes it so much more impactful. And the added hip movement is him doing the Rick Rude hip swivel before he drops down for the neck breaker. Tremendous stuff as we go into the WWF Event Center with Gene Okerlund.
We get a Hercules and Ultimate Warrior promo. This is after their WrestleMania 4 match, obviously recorded right before their WrestleMania 4 match. You've got the backdrop for the promos that happened during WrestleMania 4, and so they must have had the pre-match promo and then taped a post-match promo because they're both wearing the same gear. Warrior's got the same face paint on, like right before he was about to.
Yeah, we see this throughout these like WrestleMania update report promos that are supposed to be post-match. Everyone's like in their entrance gear and isn't sweaty, and Warrior's face paint is not messed up. I assume this match had some sort of non-finish because Hercules wants to run it back. This is a classic Warrior, completely out of his mind, incomprehensible promo. He says something about the writing on the wall from our forefathers from the great beyond. He's talking about how both he and Hercules are abnormal men, which tracks.
Yes, no lies detected. Yeah, the Warrior just yells a lot of words, doesn't say much either. Neither did Hercules. The Mania 4 report kicks in at this point, and they recap the title changes. Savage, of course. Then we get highlights of Strikeforce losing the tag team titles to Demolition.
Boo, losing the tag team titles. However, this is the best time to say, if you're watching or if you listen to the show and you don't know we have a YouTube channel, we do. If you go to YouTube, you can see the awesome Strikeforce shirt that I am wearing, which is an exact replica of the Strikeforce shirt we see momentarily. This was gifted to me by one Jeremy Deemer. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting for the perfect opportunity for a Strikeforce match / promo. Here we actually get to see them wearing the shirt. So I did the right thing waiting for this moment. This made me very happy.
Yes, it's if you haven't, even if you don't consume your podcast via the video media, we appreciate it if you'd go to YouTube, find Wrestling at Random Podcast, give us a subscribe. The subscribes and likes help us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans can find the podcast. So we appreciate that, and you get to see that sweet shirt that Adam's wearing.
Red Ringer, exactly what Strikeforce would wear. Sadly, this match ended with Strikeforce losing the tag team championships. Honestly, a very contrived, I didn't think very good looking finish. Tito ended up looking like an idiot beating up Fuji for like 30 seconds while Martel was being pinned after getting hit with a cane in the back of the neck. I was more offended, though, Jeremy. Gene Okerlund said there were 20,000 people at WrestleMania and 10 million people around the world watching on pay-per-view. This seems like an exaggeration. They say, so I'm on Cage Match right now, they say at the convention center in Atlantic City where this was held, this and WrestleMania 5, the final was held, that there were 18,165 people. That seems impossible. This is like only a lower bowl. There's no second level or third level. How were there almost 20,000 people? I do not buy this.
We did get all the entrances before we saw the finish, so we did get to hear the Strike Force theme song, Girls in Cars by Robbie Dupree, I think, sings that song. It's on the wrestling album 2, Pile Driver.
There you go, which I'm sure you have several variants of on vinyl. If not, you are searching for them as we speak.
I have a near mint on vinyl Pile Driver with the original cellophane and the hype sticker on it too. It is, it's fantastic. We get the highlights there at the end, like you mentioned, and we see the finish of Ted DiBiase versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan from the first round of the tournament. I was wildly confused on why this had any importance and why we needed to see this. And
we already did the tournament recap showing all of Savage's wins. I don't know why we need to see this. We'll know by the end.
We know by the end. It was just a weird choice to see DiBiase beating Duggan here.
It was a very weird placement. A stranger thing to me was, I guess we're not that far removed from Duggan being in Mid-South / UWF, but seeing Duggan here in like his dark navy blue tights that you more associate with him in Mid-South when he'd wear that, or the black tights, as opposed to like his bright blue Hacksaw Jim Duggan waving the American flag tights, that kind of threw me off.
Yeah, we do get a Duggan post-match promo where he says he wants a piece of Andre the Giant's because he got involved in the finish there, and that will play into later in the show.
His direct quote was, he wants Andre the Giant mano on mano, not mano y mano, mano on mano, which sounds like a problem with a record player, actually. The clips we see of Ted DiBiase versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan here, I don't know if there's ever been I would have been excited to see this match between these two guys in their previous territory, but good Lord, do I not care about it in the WWF than Ted DiBiase and Jim Duggan, or should I say Hacksaw Duggan if you're Bill Watts.
Back to the ring. Superstar Billy Graham is the manager for The Rock, Don Morocco.
I have no recollection of Superstar Billy Graham managing Don Morocco. He certainly seemed like he gave him some weightlifting.
He showed him where the weights were.
He showed him where the juice was. My God, Don Morocco. There are so many guys on this show that are just so much more jacked than anyone for their frame and size should be. And Don Morocco is certainly that here. He is taking on a man, a human being, a carbon-based life form named George Petrosky, who is about the same height as Don Morocco, probably close to the same weight. I don't know there have ever been two men that shared the same height and weight but had more wildly varying body types than these two men. He is in a blue singlet that looks like it's from the 50s. Facially, like this man simultaneously looks like he's both 18 and 55 years old at the same time.
George Petrosky from Chicago. He's I was unable to find more appearances of this man.
This could be like, who was that guy? I think it was on a Superstars or WWF TV show that we reviewed that was maybe like the worst, most untrained jobber of all time, and we tracked it down. That was literally his only professional wrestling match.
He immediately quit after we made fun of him, and we're like, this guy's horrible. He immediately quit the business after that match.
Had one match. This certainly feels like it could be might have actually been on a TBS studio show. I can't remember. Either way,
Chicago's own George Petrosky. My guess is he, after watching these horrible strikes that he threw, and then he misses a stinger splash attempt in the corner. Morocco hits him with a falling power slam, and then We get a Vanna White inset promo. She was one of the celebrities at WrestleMania 4. And she was the letter turner for Wheel of Fortune, and quite the sex symbol for this point in the late 80s.
She still, as we record this, is the letter turner, or I guess the touchscreen letter pusher for Wheel of Fortune. No more Pat Sajak. He's been replaced by Ryan Seacrest, who I'm sure has appeared on a WWF show or a WWE show a time or two. But yeah, Vanna White in set. As this is happening, Don Morocco muscles up this big doughy dude and hits his version of a tombstone pile driver, which really, because he's got the hand like in between the legs, it's almost more like a Tenzan tombstone driver. As this match ends, Jesse Ventura just casually says that he had a few X-rated nights with Vanna White in Las Vegas during WrestleMania weekend. Wow. The other notable thing in terms of on commentary, we had another Howard Finkel inset audio. Again, you're not seeing Howard Finkel, just an audio overlay. He tells us about the major matches on this Boston Garden show coming up in March, or coming up in May. I don't know how good any of the matches actually were because it's a WWF house show from this era, but on paper, I'm rushing out and buying tickets if I'm a 7-year-old, and I wasn't even a big fan of WWF. Bret Hart versus Bad News Brown, coming off of the what happened in the Battle Royal at WrestleMania 4. King Harley Race against Jake the Snake Roberts. Rick Rude against Coco Beware, which sounds like it could be really fun. And a rematch of Demolition versus the Strike Force for the WWF Tag Team titles.
Solid cards.
Yeah. We
get in after that tombstone, Morocco gets the pin, obviously. We get in...
I thought that George Petrosky maybe had made a big comeback and
got a
schoolboy.
Petrosky did not win this match. We get an in-arena promo with Craig DeGeorge. He's interviewing the Bolsheviks and the Doctor of Style. Slick talks about Team Russia winning more gold medals than anyone in the Calgary Olympics, and then they sing the Russian national anthem, dedicating it to the Olympic team.
I'm not a huge fan of a lot of like the overly slick aspects of WWF production, even from this time, but I always loved their interview stage that they would set up. Like,
yeah, it was great.
Next to the aisleway, you'd see the whole crowd in the background. You'd see the ring in the background. I always preferred that to either in-ring interviews, because I, like a lot of old school promoters, believe the ring should be for the matches. Whether you do the interviews ringside or something like this is fine. And I think this is much better than the like, ooh, wrestlers are walking around backstage and they bump into each other. Like,
no, the platform and a big
thing. Yeah, I like it.
Back to the ring. Bad News Brown is here. He comes in and immediately jumps this jobber during the ring introductions. We get a Bret Hart inset promo following up on their confrontation at WrestleMania 4 in the Battle Royal, like you mentioned. Bad News wins this match quickly with the Ghetto Blaster. He slaps the crap out of the guy and tosses him outside the ring. Post-match, we love Bad News Brown on this podcast. I could watch a Bad News squash any day of the week.
Yeah, give me Bad News Brown, Bad News Allen squashes whenever you can. I just noted that, man, he's another one of those guys, Dynamite, Bret Hart, among many others. He's got that stampede snap to everything he does. He throws an awesome left arm lariat. You mentioned the Ghetto Blaster and Sagiri, paintbrushing him after he wins. Give me all the bad news we can get. We then get something that feels much more like out of a small-time territory than you would expect from 1988 WWF. We get a fundraiser graphic on the screen with the address or phone number to send in or call so that your organization, your school can host a WWF fundraising event show.
Bam Bam Bigelow with Oliver Humperdinck come out. I loved Bam Bam Bigelow as a kid. I thought he was so cool. With the flame gear, the tattooed flame head, and just like what a guy Bam Bam was. His opponent here is Conquistador #1.
The most jacked conquistador who has ever lived. His body is exploding out of this full gold bodysuit. You mentioned Oliver Humperdinck. I believe on one of the previous WWF shows that we reviewed, I can't remember whether it was Superstars, a challenge, maybe a primetime, we chronicled the Bam Bam Bigelow manager search where everyone was after him. You had Slick.
That was a primetime wrestling. Yeah.
Primetime. There you go. And he chose Oliver Humperdinck to be his manager. I remember Big Daddy Dink, the future broadcast partner of Gordon Solie, calling New Japan Pro Wrestling for Eurosport, gloating in front of all the heel managers when Bam Bam chose him.
Bam Bam does a cartwheel into a drop kick, which is always impressive. We get a Bob Uecker inset promo talking about how WrestleMania 4 was even better for him than WrestleMania 3's experience was. Bam Bam does a slingshot from the apron over the top rope into the ring into a splash for the pin.
Bam Bam, one of those guys, like you think of his couple short runs in the NWA, his short run here in the WWF, where we mentioned they had him teaming with Hogan in the main event in Arena of the show. Like, companies had big plans for him, and it always kind of, part of the pun, flamed out. He went to New Japan and had a great run there. Definitely worth checking out the dark side of the ring on Bam Bam Bigelow from a few seasons ago. Gives you more insight into kind of who he was and the kind of the downfall, unfortunately.
We get an event center with Mean Gene again. We get a promo from Demolition and Mr. Fuji, the new tag team champions.
Demolition Axe, we should mention.
Yep.
A man who, growing up, I knew Demolition Axe was Bill Eadie. I knew he was older than most guys. The face paint, but he was older than most guys. And that he would, he was a big star when he was younger, a big single star, but didn't know a whole lot about him. Here on this show, over the course of really the last couple years, and the bonus feed in particular, we have come to fall in love, to adore Bill Eadie in his earlier years as the Masked Superstar. I can never, ever watch Demolition Axe the same way again.
I literally leaned forward to listen to him doing his promo because of our love for the Masked Superstar. He's on the Mount Rushmore of guys we didn't know we liked until we started doing this podcast. And yeah, it was great to get to see him here. It's not the same. He's not as good as Demolition Axe, but man, if you want to know about Bill Eadie, Demolition Axe as Masked Superstar, go watch some of that footage. Look at some of the stuff we've reviewed in the bonus feed, and for sure check out. There's a book called The Six Pack, and they do an entire chapter on Bill Eadie. Highly recommend that book as well. Fantastic stuff. Here, we just get a promo then from Strikeforce, where they come out wearing the shirt that Adam's wearing right now, saying that they worked too hard to let Demolition steal the belts using Mr. Fuji's cane. We go back to the ring.
Do we ever go back to the ring for a match featuring a man who, believe it or not, on the bonus feed, we have a curated list of this man. There are two men in this match. One is Andre the Giant. There's not a curated list as of yet of Andre the Giant matches, I don't believe, although we have seen some crazy, like, old Andre the Giant French wrestling, which is mind-blowing, seeing him doing all different stuff. But his opponent, South Bend, Indiana's own Brian Costello, we have a curated list of in the bonus feed.
If you go over to, when we keep mentioning the bonus feed, if you're a new listener here, you go to patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. There, if you sign up for $5, you unlock the entire back catalog, over 200 episodes of bonus content that you cannot get over here in the free feed. We've got some samples in the free feed. You can listen to a couple of samples, but full-blown 200 extra episodes of this podcast, all available when you pay $5. It unlocks the entire back catalog, including episode 136 of the bonus content. That is our curated list of Brian Costello matches. Definitely go check that out. Go check out all of the bonus content that every single week over the bonus feed. More and more bonus content.
When you mentioned that we've had we've occasionally dropped in one of those, maybe like 3 or 4 times. So even if you've heard those 3 or 4 bonus episodes we've dropped in the free feed, there are more than 200 more you have never heard.
So this match, Brian Costello and Andre the Giant. Costello, a super. We were making Costello sound like he's important. He is not. He's a super jobber.
He is. I can't remember who chose that.
I think it was Patron Richard.
Brian Costello. That sounds like a Patron Richard move. I love it.
So Andre headbutts this man immediately, throws Costello outside. There was no bell, so the match didn't start yet, apparently.
So that means Brian Costello did not lose. Brian Costello went one-on-one with Andre the Giant and did not drop the fall. He can truthfully say that.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan hits the ring. He grabs the mic. He says, "I'm not afraid of you." And Andre audibly laughs in this man's face. Duggan then challenges him to a one-on-one match. Andre responds by immediately choking Duggan out. He's choking him with the strap of his gear, hitting big headbutts.
If you recall, if you're listening in linear fashion, on last week's show, we reviewed World of Sport. I believe it was it Alan Dennison? I can't remember which. There was a man.
No, it was Wild Angus.
It was Wild Angus. That's correct. It was Wild Angus. He had a blue Andre the Giant style singlet, and he choked a man out with the monotard, if you want to call it that, portion of this one strap singlet. 1 week later, here in linear fashion and Wrestling at Random, Andre the Giant does this to great effect. These are times where even I wonder what's up with the randomizer.
Yeah, Duggan is bleeding from the mouth here. He grabs his 2x4 out of desperation and hits Andre in the head with it. Andre goes down, and he is knocked unconscious, which is incredibly rare to see Andre the Giant down, number one. Number two, knocked unconscious. The bloody Duggan celebrates in the ring to the delight of the crowd.
Everything about this was great.
It was great.
I would go so far to say this is one of my favorite WWF angles of all time. This, other than the fact this is in a big, brightly lit arena, this felt straight out of classic Bill Watts Mid-South. And not just because Jim Duggan was in it, the whole thing, the way this happened, the drama of Duggan almost being choked out and reaching down and grabbing the board and then knocking him out. This was so great. And there will be more to this in a little bit.
Yeah, so so he's down for like 5 minutes. Like he's down, still selling this shot from the board. He's
down. We go from this point where this angle just happens. We go to Mean Gene Okerlund back at the event center. We get a post-match promo from Ted DiBiase, which was actually recorded before, but at WrestleMania, he says everyone conspired against him. The belt belongs to him, and I'm just like, well, he's not wrong. We get a Randy Savage post-match Mania promo. He has a great line where he says, "Where money lies, honor dies." And then he tells, direct quote, Elizabeth to look through the video scope and tell people how you're feeling. One of one, Randy Savage.
Forever we'll be referencing a camera as a video scope.
Oh, I will be saying that in my real life as well.
Yes.
And people will be like, what are you talking about? We are back from commercial break. We see a slow motion replay, which looks tremendous. We talk a lot about how 80s wrestling was obsessed with slow motion replays that exposed the business, but they had the technology, so they just wanted to use it. Here, this looks great. In the slow-mo, you see Duggan just absolutely clobber Andre right in the forehead with the 2x4. And then we see Andre has been on the mat the entire time, and Vince says, he has been out for 5 minutes this entire time since we were last with you. He has been out.
Kudos to Andre for selling the hell out of this. Like when he gets hit with the board and goes down, he's selling it. When he's unconscious, he's selling being unconscious. Like this was Andre making this whole thing happen here. This was tremendous. And then after we get that replay, we've got doctors, we've got WWF security personnel, we've got everybody in the ring checking on Andre the Giant, trying to assist him. Andre starts throwing off the doctors. Like, when an MMA fighter comes to after being knocked out and still thinks he's in the fight, here's Andre. Yeah, here's Andre throwing off the doctors, and then he comes to, and now he's just pissed, and he's throwing everybody around. He's attacking the doctors and security, and he attacks a cameraman, which was a really cool visual because they hold on the camera angle during the attack, and then at the last minute they switch, and you can see the cameraman falling off the apron as Andre's got a hold of him. This was tremendous stuff. Andre walks to the back of the locker room, yelling,
before he walks to the back, he steps on a man's head. One of these referees or doctors gets knocked down. Andre just steps on the man's head, and we see a replay, and he legit steps on the dude's head. There are bodies littered everywhere. He double coconuts a ref and a doctor, which is just an amazing visual. And then, like you said, he is irate going to the back looking for Duggan.
Yeah, he's yelling. He's pointing and yelling at people. Like, yeah, he's fired up. We then get a preview of next week's show. They run down who's going to be on next week. The Islanders, Strike Force, the One Man Gang, the Ultimate Warrior, Ted DiBiase, Junkyard Dog, and Rick Rude will all be here next week. Favorite thing on the show for you?
Without a doubt, it's the Duggan Andre angle. That was so well done. And even if they hadn't come back and did what we described to end the show, it would have been great. Having that happen afterwards, honestly, again, one of my favorite, whatever you want to call it, angles, segments, couple of segments on a WWF TV show from this era, particularly like we think about the best angles, Savage and Jake with the snake, other things that like everyone remembers. I had no recollection of this, but to me, this deserves to be right up there with any of the rest of them. Just tremendous, tremendous stuff. Honorable mention to Howard Finkel's performance in the inset overlay audio, telling us what was coming up in Boston Garden. I enjoyed that. It was a different way of doing it, and Howard Finkel was so enthusiastic. It was great.
Is there a worse thing on this show for you?
I mean, not really. I mean, we did... honestly, maybe the best thing on the show is we avoided the Outlaw Ron Bass squash match that was taped on the show.
No Ron Bass, no Greg Hammer. Greg Valentine worked like 3 times on the show, and we didn't have to see him. So
we did see him in a little bit of highlights. Maybe to me, the worst thing on the show was the odd decision to not show the finish of a couple of Savages matches in the tournament, and the odd placement of showing DiBiase and Duggan the finish to that after we already saw DiBiase lose. I would have maybe done that earlier on in the show. But for what it was, this was very fun.
Yeah, super fun, easy watch. And yeah, that's an angle that would have been played the next day on Challenge. It would have been played on the Monday or Tuesday or Thursday, depending on what day it was airing. The Primetime Wrestling would have aired this, had a segment with Heenan and everybody talking about it. So yeah, no, this was it's always good when they run an angle on one of the syndicated shows. It's always fun because it's usually really well done. Yeah,
and it makes up for, very rarely, if ever, on these WWF TV shows from this era did you get anything even approaching a competitive match. But you get a big angle like this that was important, so you felt like like it was worth watching. Honorable mention as well to Strike Force wearing the Strike Force T-shirt. There were not many wrestlers that I was a big fan of in the WWF back then. I was not a big WWF kid. Brett, Perfect were my singles guys, and even though their run was short-lived, Strike Force, and prior to that, Can-Am Connection when it was Martel and Tom Zink. Big fan, so I'm glad I got a good opportunity an excuse to wear this shirt.
We'd love to hear your thoughts about this time period. Where did you watch WrestleMania 4? If you did, make sure you're interacting with the show via social media at Wrestle at Random on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. Where there's social media, you can find us at Wrestle at Random. And make sure that you're telling your wrestling fan friends about the show. That's how we spread the word about this. Wrestling fans know other wrestling fans. So make sure you're telling them about the Wrestling at Random podcast. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. And we're available on all podcatchers of choice and the YouTube channel that we mentioned earlier. All the links I described, the entire back catalog of this show, all the free feed, everything, all the back catalog is available at wrestlingatrandom.com. with that, we're going to call it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Randomizer. This was a good time. I was not necessarily overly enthused when I saw Superstars 1988. Good time, and we'll see what the Randomizer brings us next week.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.